A couple of summers ago, my girlfriend and I were camping in a national forest in northern Wisconsin. And after our experience, we do not plan to return. My girlfriend and I are from Chicago, so northern Wisconsin was our go-to place for R&R. We've done a number of hiking trips in northern Wisconsin, and in the UP too, but never to this area. We are not backpacking experts or anything, but we've been to a number of national parks and have been out hiking and exploring when we can find some time away from work on more than a few occasions. We love getting away from people and just relaxing in nature. But this trip sure made us appreciate the presence of other people around us in unfamiliar places. Our plan was to hike to a remote section of the Northern Country Trail. The Northern Country Trail is a national scenic trail, like the Appalachian Trail, but it gets much less use. In some parts of northern Wisconsin, the trail is really remote, and the only access is via logging roads. We plan to hike 15 miles along the trail to a backpack shelter, spend the night, and hike back to the car the following day. We spend the night at a friend's house in Warsaw, and we set out early the next day to the trailhead. As we enter the national forest boundary, we were captivated by the beauty of the thick green forest. I drove slowly along the gravel logging roads as we made our way to our parking spot. While we were driving to the trailhead, we passed a couple of people standing next to a parked truck on the side of the road. They appeared to be hillbillies, as they had a rusted-out, bunged-up pickup truck, complete with Confederate bumper stickers and everything. As we drove past, I waved, trying to be friendly, and they just stared back without returning the greeting. Friendly people, I thought to myself. After we passed them, I looked in the rearview mirror and noticed that they were still staring at us. And before we rounded a bend, I glanced back into the mirror again and saw them watching us through the haze of road dust. My girlfriend and I joked about the up north people, but we didn't think anything of the encounter. Aside from those people, we didn't encounter anyone else on the remote logging roads within the national forest boundary. We found the trailhead about 15 minutes later, after winding our way on the narrow logging road. There was no one else parked at the trailhead. It seemed like a perfect chance to get some needed solitude, fresh air, and relaxation. After parking and making sure the car was locked, we hoisted our packs and set off on the trail. The weather was relatively cool, which thankfully kept the mosquitoes and biteflies at bay. We took pictures along the way, and we marveled at the lushness of the forest and the topography of the glacial moraine. After a solid 8 hours of hiking, we found our campsite finally. It consisted of a wooden backpack shelter and a fire ring. Even though the shelter provided ample space for us, we opted to set our tent in a small clearing, about 100 feet behind the shelter. We built a fire at the shelter fire ring, and I boiled water for our dehydrated trail food. As we ate, we watched the sky slowly turn dark. My girlfriend and I passed around some wine, and we marveled at how many stars you could see away from the city. When the fire was reduced to a small pile of glowing embers, we decided to head back to the tent. We settled into our tent and looked through the pictures we took that day. But after lugging a heavy pack for 15 miles and drinking some wine, I was ready for some shut-eye. When we camped at state and national parks, I usually wore earplugs. But that night, there were no RVs or other campers to make noise, so I just closed my eyes and let the noise of the forest lull me to sleep. My girlfriend was very uneasy that night, but she normally has some apprehension, whenever we're sleeping away from home, that is. I'm not sure when we drifted to sleep, but we awoke to a bone-chilling noise. It was pitch dark outside, and over the insects in the forest, I heard a dull thud, It sounded like someone was hitting two logs together. My girlfriend and I were wide awake at this point, and we just lay there silently in our tent, hearing the noise again. Our old tent had mesh windows, but the backpacking tent that we were using that time, it had no windows, so we could only guess at what was making the noise outside of our tent. We initially thought that an animal had got to our food and garbage bag, which we left in the shelter, but the noise was too distinct, and it didn't sound like rustling through food wrappers or our camp equipment or anything. Our hearts, they were pounding as we heard the persistent knock in the darkness. Unarmed and scared shitless, we didn't know what to do. I would normally have carried a can of bear spray, but I foolishly decided to leave it at home to save weight, against the wishes of my girlfriend. The knocking continued, but we remained still as not to give away our location. For all we knew, whatever was making the noise had already spotted our tent. After what seemed like an eternity, the knocking sound ceased. We lay in complete silence, with only the dull buzz of the insects in the background. And then we heard it. Leaves rustling, a branch breaking, and voices. We heard low talking in the distance. We couldn't make out what was being said, but it sounded like a couple of people talking in the distance. The voices continued for a bit, but to our relief, the voices didn't seem to be getting louder. Whoever was out there obviously didn't spot the tent or just decided to leave us alone. We sat in our tent for the rest of the night, adrenaline surging through our veins, and at first light, we slowly got out of the tent. I looked around in all directions to see if anyone was out there, but I only saw the forest and the backpack shelter. We quickly rolled up our sleeping bags and camp pads and put our tent away. When we got to the shelter, my girlfriend screamed in horror. On the entrance to the shelter, the wood was freshly cut. The word "kill" was cut into the shelter wall, and there were a number of axe and knife cuts where someone was obviously chopping at the wall. I looked at the ground and saw a scattering of fresh wood splinters. After grabbing our food supply and garbage bag, we just got the hell out of there. We were nearly jogging with our gear as we made our way back to the car, and I just kept glancing back over my shoulder and gazing through the woods to see if anyone was following us. We traversed the glacial eskers that we saw the day before, and we knew that we were getting close to our car. We were quietly rejoicing as we neared the trailhead. We made it back in near record time, but something was wrong. The windshield wiper on my car was sticking straight up, and there was something stuck to the wiper. As we inched closer to the car, I saw that there was blood smeared on the window shield, and a squirrel carcass was impaled on the wiper blade. There was hair and blood stuck to the wiper and on the hood of the car. I didn't bother cleaning off the car, and we just threw our gear in the trunk, and I sped off without removing the animal from the wiper blade too. As I sped down the gravel logging road, I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, but I couldn't see anything through the cloud of road dust behind the car. When we got to the gas station by the nearest town, I finally removed the carcass with a wad of newspaper, and I tried to remove as much dry blood as I could. I filled up on gas, and we didn't stop until we made it to Milwaukee. And this was the last trip that I took to the woods of northern Wisconsin. I love camping, and anytime my friends and I came home from college, we would load up our cooler with beer, grab some gear and go screw around outside. Unfortunately for me, when I was actually at school, none of my sorority sisters or other friends ever wanted to go with me, so I would often suffer withdrawals from camping. One day, the weather was way too nice to waste, so I grabbed some of my gear, hopped in a car that I borrowed from a buddy, and drove to a spot that was secluded, yet within a safe distance to civilization and that stuff, and that way I could run for help if I needed it. Camping, it can also creep me out sometimes, but that creepy feeling is also somewhat of a plus for me. It's the same reason that people listen to these stories. It's kind of fun to be scared sometimes. So, I make a little camp and get a fire going. I hadn't brought all that much to eat, but I was enjoying myself, reading and looking around the area, that sort of thing. But I got the feeling like I was being watched or something, and I just stopped dead in my tracks. I hear a twig crunch over to my right, and then I see a doe bolt from 100 feet or so in front of me. I laughed at myself and went back to the camp with the armful of wood that I'd gathered. I kept freaking myself out too, hearing sounds just outside of the ring of light casted by the fire. I always get these kinds of fears into my head, so I just shrugged it off and kept whittling at a stick that I'd been messing with. Around 1, I decided to go into my tent and snuff out the lantern. I had been slamming beers in the most unladylike fashion ever, and smoking cheap cigars, which is another reason why I like camping. I can act however I want. So I passed out relatively quickly. At about 2 o'clock, I start hearing footsteps. They sound pretty light and sort of timid. I think to myself that it must be that deer again, or some other animal, like a raccoon, because I had probably left some food out or something. But I still stay on guard just in case. About 30 minutes of sleeping with one eye open, I hear a rubbing noise, and the tent fabric is being pushed in a bit. I don't know how I didn't shit my sleeping bag, but I just sat there, paralyzed with my K-bar in my hand. I desperately wanted to thrust the knife through the tent fabric, but I was still holding out hope that it was some of my buddies from a frat joking with me or something. And then, suddenly as it had begun, it all just stopped. I was starting to feel slightly more secure, because daylight would be coming in about 2 or 3 hours. But I sure as shit wasn't going to go to sleep or anything. All of a sudden, at about 4 o'clock, I realized I should have put my boots on so that if anything did happen, I'd be ready. After having stayed up and keeping alert a little while longer, my friend's car alarm goes blaring. I freaked the fuck out and ran out of the tent. I got about 2 steps before something grabs me around the mouth. I open my mouth to scream, but instead, the person's pinky finger slips between my teeth. I've heard that people can perform superhuman feats when they have huge adrenaline rushes, and in my case, I just clamped down. And there's no way to say this without sounding ridiculous, but his finger just popped off. He screamed, pulled his hand away with his missing digit falling to the ground. He took off running down the hill I was camping on, and I took off quick in the opposite direction. I must have looked totally ridiculous to the people whose house I ran to. A little sorority girl in a wife beater, boxers, and steel-toe boots. I also had some blood that had oozed out of my lip. Not from the finger, but because I'd also managed to take a pretty good chunk out of my lip as well. I told them what happened, and they called the police, got me some real clothing, and the man at the house made me a whiskey and coke. When the cops got there, they checked it out. When they came back, it was light out. They brought me back so that I could get my friend's car, and what I saw just made me even more scared. Right next to my tent was a red gas can, which I can only imagine what that was for. And the finger was also gone, which only suggests that he must have come back for it. But the real kicker is that they never caught the guy. So, somewhere out there, there's a man sitting down to dinner, maybe alone, maybe with a wife and a couple of kids, and he's missing his right pinky because of me. My New Year resolution in 2012 was to get back in shape again. After my first kid was born, I had lost my athletic interest, but I had every intention of getting it back. So I started running 4 days a week with my friend Hannah, who's a great runner and motivator. We would run after work, 5 to 10 kilometers, usually favoring the forest trail. It's the kind of trail that has lighting in the darker months of the year, so you can run there any time really. Once you turn on the lights, you get about 45 minutes to run the shorter trails, and longer to run the longer ones, and then the lights just shut off automatically. We had been running for about 2 months when we started seeing this same man hanging around the parking lot every time that we got there. He was a thin man, 25 to 30 years of age, always dressed in sports clothes, but never actually running. He also never looked you in the eye either. We speculated that he could be homeless, camping nearby or something, because he was constantly there. We got used to seeing him, sitting somewhere close by, just silently, and always on his own. We actually felt sorry for him. He never seemed to talk to anyone or interact at all. But there was also something about him that made us hesitate to talk to him or ask if he was okay. We couldn't pinpoint what it was at the time, but something just wasn't completely right with him. One evening, Hannah didn't make it to our run, and I just decided to go on my own. I arrived at the parking lot, my car being the only car there. I did some stretching, turned on the lights, and set off on the 5-kilometer trail. I hadn't seen the thin, silent man when I started my run. Perhaps it was just getting too cold to sit there now that it was autumn, dark, and getting closer to the freezing point. He must have been there, though, somewhere in the shadows, because when I got to the top of the first steep hill, I could hear heavy breathing somewhere behind me. I look over my shoulder and I see him. He is running like a man obsessed, in regular shoes, not running shoes, with his arms moving in a really strange, stiff manner, as if he was made of metal, his hands like arrows, straight and in an upward-inward angle. Sort of like a sprinter, but more extreme, moving like a robot. For the first time, he looked me straight in the eyes too, and it was the eyes of a predatory animal, and it made my heart freeze. He had never done anything to harm me before, or anyone else as far as I knew, but the look in his eyes alone was enough to let me know that I was facing a serious threat. I started running faster, trying to create distance between us, and I could hear his heavy breathing getting even more strained. I ran like my life depended on it, adrenaline pumping through my body and giving me new strength. I tore off my necklace and threw it on the ground, thinking, I've got to leave a trace if he takes me. Something has to be left behind. I tried screaming, hoping that someone would be close enough to hear me, but I couldn't scream. I was so out of breath. Why is he doing this? What does he want? Who is he? I thought as I started to feel my lungs burn. And then I thought of my 15-month-old daughter and ran until I could taste blood in my mouth. He was still behind me, maybe 100 meters now, and I knew that if I tripped and fell or ran out of energy or fumbled with the car keys once I reached the parking lot, that I was screwed. So once I reached the sharp turn on the trail, I ran off the trail and ran straight into the dark woods. I ran only for a short distance and then laid down flat on my stomach, my hands searching for a rock to defend myself with if he found me. I realized then, though, that I was wearing bright running clothes with reflectors and neon coloring. Honestly, I had never felt so visible in the dark before. I could hear him reach the turn, and thank God, he just kept on running. I started to slowly, and as silently as possible, move further into the darkness. But my heart sank again as soon as I heard rapid footsteps closing in from the trail. He had realized that I must have gone off trail once he saw that there was no sign of me ahead. He stopped, and I stopped. I could imagine him listening for any sound, and I held my breath and begged to God that I don't believe in to make him go away. After a while, I heard him say something in a language that I didn't recognize, and he walked off. But I didn't move. I feared that he would wait for me by the car and realize that I had to get off the trail and onto the main road and stop someone. I couldn't go back to the parking lot. So I started to make my way further into the woods, knowing that I would eventually end up on the last part of the long tail and close to the main road. As I was walking, though, the lights on the trail, they suddenly shut off. Honestly, that made me calmer at first. The dark was a comfort and a protection. But then, after only a few moments, it switched on again. This could mean that another person had just started their run, and soon I would even have someone there to help me. Or that he was out there looking for me, or getting ready to prey on another lonely runner. I decided against waiting to find out, though, and continued my way towards the main road. It was dark, and I fell multiple times, my clothes getting wet from the damp vegetation, and I started to get cold. After what felt like a lifetime, I could see the 10-kilometer trail ahead and knew that I was close to the main road. Soon, I could hear the traffic too. Once I made it to the road, I must have looked like I had been in a terrible accident or something. Blood from several small cuts from the falling, my clothes dirty and my face, I assume, petrified. My bright runner's shirt soon attracted the attention of a passing car. My waving and desperate shouting made it stop. The driver, a 40-ish man with 2 kids in the back seat, spent the next 10 minutes or so trying to make sense of what I tried to say between the sobbing and the crying. He asked if I wanted to lift back to the parking lot, and I told him no. Please take me home instead. At home, my husband insisted on going to the parking lot to retrieve the car and call the police. And report what? I asked. Technically, no crime had been committed. I just knew that he was out there to get me. My husband eventually went back for the car, and the driver's seat window was smashed and my phone was gone. And so was the photo of my daughter that I had had hanging from the mirror. To this day, I don't know what he was trying to do or why he chased me the way he did. But the look in his eyes, there's no doubt in my mind that he had bad intentions. A few years back, my girlfriend and I, having hiked several other parts of the Appalachian Trail, we decided that we wanted to give the southern portion of Virginia's trail a shot. It's about 166 miles long and runs through George Washington and Jefferson National Forest. This is definitely one of the more remote and less traveled parts of the trail, which is exactly what we were looking for. We gathered our gear and made our way to the start of the Virginia Creeper Trail to begin our journey. We had planned our journey to end at Damascus, and figured that by the time that we got there, we would be more than ready to get home to our own beds. It was early October, and the changing of the leaves and colors, they were amazing. The air was crisp and cool, Perfect hiking weather with beautiful scenery. The majority of the trip was pretty uneventful, just your typical hike. But our last couple of nights is where things got weird. On this portion of the trail, you're supposed to camp on the trail or a designated shelter. We didn't really want to run into other people and didn't want anyone coming up on us in the middle of the night or anything. So we decided to ignore those suggestions and find our own little spot off the trail. A little searching around and we found a spot a little ways off the trail, in the middle of a small clearing. It was honestly perfect. We set up camp, cooked some food and talked for a while, and then snuggled up and went to sleep for the night. Somewhere around 2 a.m., I was awoke by my girlfriend shaking me awake, telling me, "Get your gun, someone is outside walking around our tent." She informed me that, apparently, she woke up to what sounded like someone right outside the tent running a knife or something along the side while circling us. When hiking, I carry a 1911 and a judge with me. You never know exactly who or what you might run into when on such a long hike in a remote location. So I got the judge out of my pack, and then we just sat silently listening for any sounds. And there were a few minutes of nothing but the breeze blowing through the trees. But then I heard it. Someone or something walking in the woods behind our tent. I got the flashlight and silently made my way out of the tent. Our fire had gone out, so it was nearly pitch black at this point. Illuminated by only the dim glow of the October moon, I told my girlfriend to stay put while I checked it out. I didn't flick the flashlight on right away so as to not give away that I was out of the tent and have it become a shining beacon of my location. Instead, I waited to hear more noises. After a few minutes, there were some snaps and cracks, and it sounded like it was bipedal, based on the way the steps were paced. I turned on the flashlight and flooded the area with light. I thought I saw someone move behind a tree, and I yelled out and told them to go away, that I was armed. I kept the light on the area with my gun drawn and slowly approached towards the area where I thought I saw the figure. And then, from my right, I hear what sounds like someone running away through the woods. I spin and face my light that way, and then from the original spot, hear who or whatever was there take off into the woods. Well, there was no way that I was giving chase, so I just returned to the campsite. I tell my girlfriend about what happened, and I end up sitting guard outside the tent, in the darkness until daybreak. In the morning, I looked around a bit for signs of who or whatever it was, and I discovered a boot print in some soft, moist dirt not far from our tent. It definitely wasn't mine, and it wasn't my girl's, so this freaked me out as it confirmed that someone, and perhaps more than one, was skulking around our tent in the dark. I kept it to myself though because I didn't want to freak out my girl any more than she already was. At this point, we were pretty deep in and still had 2 days left. That day, we walked a little faster than normal though and covered as much ground as possible, just to try and play it safe. When it came time to set up camp, I found a spot near a cliff where we could place the tent in a small overhang and prevent anyone from coming up behind us. But the whole day, up to this point, I had a feeling that we were being followed. I had no confirmation of this, as I hadn't seen or heard anyone else, but it was just a gut feeling. We set up camp and made some food, and then retreated to the tent. I gave my girl the 1911, and I kept the judge right next to me, and I assured her that if I slept at all, it would be with one eye open. After a while, she drifted off to sleep, and I stayed awake listening to the sounds of the woods at night. I was awake for a few hours, just waiting to see if anything was going to happen. At some point, I guess my exhaustion caught up with me, and I just drifted off. I awoke sometime later to what sounded like someone going through our stuff outside the tent. I grabbed my gun and woke my girlfriend, shushing her to be quiet. From the faint glow of the fire, I could see someone's silhouette against the tent. There really was someone out there. I yelled out to them, something along the lines of, "We're armed, get the fuck out of here," and they just dropped what they were doing and bolted. I came out of the tent, a gun drawn and ready to shoot someone, and our stuff was strewn everywhere. They had rummaged through quite a bit of our stuff. I walked to the edge of the woods in the direction of whoever was out there had fled. There was a creek nearby, and I walked to the edge, where there was a small trail running alongside it. Down the creek, I could see a light in the distance. It looked like a lantern, the way it flickered. And then I saw 3 more emerge from the other side of the woods. Well, I told my girlfriend to start packing up whatever she could and that we were leaving now. We packed up everything of value, left the tent and a few other items and headed back onto the trail in the middle of the night. I swear I kept hearing people talking off in the woods and hearing branches snap for quite some ways. I kept looking behind us every few seconds to make sure nobody was coming up on us. It was completely nerve-wracking. If something happened, we were still a long ways from anywhere, and quite literally on our own, since we hadn't seen another hiker the entire time we'd been out there. It really felt like we were in serious danger at this point. We had been walking for quite some time when I heard something in the woods behind us. As we rounded a corner, I turned around and saw someone step out onto the trail and just stand there, watching us. It was just as the sun was coming up and barely any light. I couldn't make out any features, just the silhouette. I stopped and looked at them for a second, and asked them who they were and what they wanted, and they just stood there, silently, watching us, and then just turned around and walked back into the woods. We picked up the pace and just kept going, looking back every so often, and thankfully, we didn't see them again. But my gut told me that they were still there for quite a ways. We eventually reached the end of the trail and got to where we had parked my girlfriend's car, extremely exhausted at this point. We made it out of the Virginia woods without becoming a meal for a clan of cannibalistic inbred hillbillies, which is what I pictured happening in my head the whole time. I have no idea who they were or what they wanted. Maybe it was just someone messing with us. Maybe it really was a clan of deformed hillbillies who were hunting us. I'll never know because I will not be returning to find out. This story takes place in August of 2013 in the mountains of southern Oregon. I'm a security forces airman, a military policeman, USAF for short. My girlfriend was at work, and as a sweltering hot day began to turn into thunderstorms, my buddy Nick, another military cop, and I decided to go explore some back roads and get out of the heat in town. Southern Oregon is crisscrossed with logging roads, some actively used and many are just totally forgotten and grown over. Nick and I spent many of our days off, starting on roads that we knew, finding roads that we didn't know, driving for hours into the mountains, and eventually navigating back to paved roads. On this particular day, with storm clouds building over the mountains, we set off on a road that we had never been on, and began the drive into the mountains. After driving for around an hour, we hadn't seen or heard any signs of other people in the woods. We rounded a bend into the thick fir woods, and emerged into a meadow that was totally surrounded by thick aspen groves. The meadow was perfectly flat, and eerily still. We both noticed the strange stillness almost immediately. No birds, hardly any insect noise, no squirrels, and definitely no other people. On the far side of the meadow, right at the edge of the tree line, there was also a picnic table. The table was very odd, however. It was painted a bright orange, and was much larger than a typical picnic table in a park. Remarking on this, Nick drove through the meadow to get a closer look. I remember being apprehensive as we approached. The whole scenario was exceptionally strange. The overall silence of the aspen grove was also really unsettling to me. Also, it was nearly impossible to see far into the trees as aspens grow extremely close together. When we parked by the table, I hopped out of the passenger seat of the truck to check it out. I'm not very tall, only about 5'5", but regardless, the table was ridiculously oversized and practically unusable. The seats were nearly at chest level, meaning that I would have to climb up to even sit on them. As I was looking at the table, Nick called me over to the truck, and I noticed he was looking back into the aspens. At first, I couldn't see what he was looking at, but then I noticed a splash of color that was completely out of place in the thick trees. There was a small one-man tent set back in the trees, about 50 feet from the strange table. I had an initial feeling of dread and felt certain that there was someone in the tent, and if we could see the tent, they could see us. There were no campgrounds in this area, no people, no main roads for miles. Surely, someone camping so remotely would be, at the very least, a bit of a strange person. However, as we observed the tent, we didn't see any movement or hear any sounds coming from it. Nick suggested that I call out, and although I didn't want to, I did anyway.
"Hey, anyone in there?"
I yelled. There was no reply. Feeling completely on edge, Nick and I thought about driving away and just leaving this strange area. But we began to fear the worst. What if there was a body in the tent? What if somebody had gotten kidnapped? Foolish, I know, but we thought it all the same. After some debate, we decided to have Nick turn the truck around to drive away from the camp. Should we need to leave in a hurry, he'd be waiting behind the wheel. So, with my heart pounding, I started walking through the trees towards the tent. I was totally keyed up with all my senses on full alert. When I reached the campsite, several things struck me as odd. There were backpacks scattered all over. No fire had been built, no wood collected. The tent was literally full of backpacks and women's clothing. Full of dread, I turned to leave and tell Nick what I had seen, and as I left, I heard Nick start yelling.
"Yo, let's go. Let's get the fuck out of here."
Not knowing why he was yelling, I ran back to the truck. When I broke out of the trees, I saw a beat-up old Ford Taurus on the road, blocking us from leaving the meadow. I immediately leapt into the passenger seat, and Nick floored the gas pedal. The car was occupied by 2 men, and there was a third person laying against the window in the back. As we drove across the meadow, the driver attempted to block us from the road, but Nick drove around them and accelerated the way that we had come from. I looked back and saw the car attempting to turn around on the narrow road. Nick, he drove like a madman, and though I was honestly terrified that they'd catch up with us. We hit the highway without seeing the car again. I still don't know if the person in the back was male or female. Needless to say, I called the state police and they promised to send a trooper out to check out the scene. However, I received a call the next day from a trooper stating that the campsite, the backpacks and the women's clothing, they were all gone, though he could tell that people had been in the area. The strange table was still by the thick aspen grove though, although I haven't returned to the area and don't intend to anytime soon.